There's been several notable additions to the Dolphins roster this week. Which one of them will actually help this team win games in 2025?
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Today on the show, take a look at 5 notable names that the Dolphins have added this week through waiver wires, 53-man transactions, practice squad additions. Which ones are actually going to help this football team win some games? And we had some quotes come out from Rasul Douglas, who signed this week in free agency, about his experience in the Dolphins scheme, what that means. Had a chance to watch the film on both Greg Dulcich and JuJu Brents over the last 24 hours. Of course, I posted the podcast yesterday. JuJu Brents, we knew at the time of recording, Greg Dulcich added shortly thereafter. As soon as I hit publish on the show, the news came through that they got Dulcich on the practice squad. So Dolphins had made another move for another corner in free or on the waiver wire. That was Jalen Armour-Davis from Baltimore. They were one of 4 teams that claimed Armour-Davis. They were third in the queue of the teams that got him. Tennessee had the first spot in the waiver wire. They end up landing Jalen Armour-Davis. So some context clues for the Dolphins and the lip service that they give the cornerbacks about their confidence and how much they like them. They put in 2 separate waiver claims, and if they'd have been granted both players, they would have rostered both on the 53 as cuts from other teams. So kind of take it as a grain of salt, right? There was all the lip service about how hard the guys were working. Kohu goes down at the beginning of camp. Hilton comes in. Hilton doesn't make the team. Jack Jones making some progress, or at least it seems like he's made some progress. He's been an experienced player. You hear the continued enthusiasm for Storm Duck. Jason Marshall moves inside. Cam Smith goes on non-football illness list at the cutdown window. So you were a few teams claiming away from 3 separate corners. You have all that to go with the Dolphins and their Nike rivalry uniforms that came out today. It's dark, like midnight blue. A lot of people think it's black. I see blue. I do see the based off the lighting, though, it is unclear at times, but definitely a dark blue base. Helmet, pants, and uniform. If you haven't checked that out, swing over to the Dolphins social accounts. They've got a bunch of looks at the Dolphins' new uniforms. But let's get into these names. There's a couple different – it's all the spots that you knew you were going to have questions at. Tight end, corner, offensive line. It's the spots you get the ads. So from that standpoint, let's start with Greg Dulcich. Greg Dulcich was a third-round draft choice, 80th overall in the 2022 NFL draft. In his rookie season, he had respectable production in his first season in the NFL coming out of UCLA, and I was there at that Senior Bowl that he participated in, and I thought he showcased a lot of great appeal. But the production that he has his rookie season is 30-something catches, 400 yards. He had time on injured reserve in 2022 as rookie season, and then in 2023 he missed all but a couple of games because of hamstring issues. So hamstring first 2 years in the league was really bothersome. There's a head coaching change in there with Sean Payton. Then he gets claimed by the Giants. The Giants had drafted Theo Johnson in the draft. They had Daniel Bellinger. This offseason comes through. Dulcich is still on the roster because they claimed him with his rookie contract. But then they draft Thomas Fidone. They add Chris Manhertz, who's a little bit of a different skill set at the position. And it's just a numbers game for Greg Dulcich. But, the last year of his rookie contract and the numbers game for the Giants at tight end end up being too much for him to get claimed. So he goes unclaimed and signs on a practice squad, and he lands with Miami on August 27th, 2025. 33 catches, 411 yards, and 2 touchdowns in 10 games as a rookie for Greg Dulcich. I think this player, especially when you consider Tanner Conner has a 53 spot right now, I think Greg Dulcich can help the team. Now, that comes with a few different concessions. Greg Dulcich just gets here. This position room is very complex. There's a large menu of things you have to be comfortable with before the ball is even snapped. That Greg Dulcich is behind the 8 ball in because he didn't spend the offseason program with the team, especially relative to Tanner Conner, who's been here this is year 4 for Tanner Conner. But Greg Dulcich has a better profile as a college prospect. He's actually played tight end, not Tanner Conner converting and adding weight as a big wide receiver in college from a small school. And Greg Dulcich is 2 years younger than Tanner Conner is. All of that to me adds up to, if I was going to place my bets on one of those guys, I would make the 53 spot for Greg Dulcich. I get and respect that they're going to make this thing play itself out. They don't want to give a 53 spot versus a pet project who's been here for a long time that knows how the offense works. And I think that's a common theme when you get into who they bring back in the offensive lineup. Did they claim one of these promising young offensive linemen that flashed for another team? No. They brought back Kendall Lamm, who spent the last 2 years in the offense, knows the offense. What'd they do at running back? Did they claim Damian Martinez? No. They brought back Jeff Wilson, knows the offense. Jermichael Hasty was added today to the practice squad. Spent time in the offense. They know the offense and how it works. That's the block for Greg Dulcich. And I think if it doesn't go well, if he does not contribute to this year's team, it's either going to be the same soft tissues injuries that cost him about half of his first 3 years in the league, year and a half, or it's going to be the complexities of this offense that it does not appear that the coaching staff is willing to bend on, and they would rather have talents with more questions that know the offense instead of having higher ceiling players who maybe don't know the offense. And I get both sides of that coin. I respect the decision that you make. And this, for now, is a cake and eat it too situation. But I would like to think Greg Dulcich, if given the opportunity to do the same things Tanner Conner's being asked to do on an offensive standpoint as a flex tight end and be the hedge to Darren Waller, that's kind of the skill set for Dulcich. He's more of a flex. And I think he's got better hands. I think he's got more physicality. He's much more physicality than Tanner Conner. Tanner's going against third-string guys in the preseason and getting blown up at the point of attack. He's just not a blocker. He's a former wide receiver, and it shows. So I would tentatively say yes for Greg Dulcich, but my confidence on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being the most confident, 1 being the least confident, is probably a 5. I think the talent is very evident, but it's the non-talent elements that I think are going to define what kind of role Greg Dulcich does or does not find for this football team. JuJu Brents next. We're going to get into him in addition to Kendall Lamm. Is he OT3? Is he OT4? Rasul Douglas, is he a starter from the jump? Mike McDaniel talked about that. All that next here on Locked On Dolphins. So make sure you guys stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by PrizePick, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is heating up, having come and gone. College football is right on the doorstep. Big game between the Canes and the Irish this weekend. Whether you got your eyes on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, PrizePicks makes it easy to get into the game. You have a flex play option, which is a total game changer. Even when your picks miss, you could still double your money. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and easy. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. Do have a favor to ask for anybody who's tuning into the program. We are doing a survey here on the Locked On Network, and we want to make all of your favorite podcasts here on the network even better. If you could visit lockedonpodcast.com/survey, you could get one started, and everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. If you're watching on YouTube, we do have the QR code here that you could scan as well. So, JuJu Brents, super long, very good transitional quickness and hips for a player of his size. He's a tall, long corner, but he doesn't have the best long speed. I think that's the big physical limitation for Brents. He's a legitimate 6'3". And when he came through the NFL Combine in 2023 and became a second-round draft choice, he weighed 198 pounds. So you're talking about a 96th percentile size corner. 198 pounds is 73rd percentile for weight. He had an 82 and 5/8 wingspan, which is 99th percentile for NFL cornerbacks. It's outrageously long. Now, he had a 41.5-inch vert. It's 95th percentile. He had an 11'6" broad jump. That's 99th percentile. He had a 6.63 three-cone drill, 6.63 seconds. That's outstanding. That's 93rd percentile for corners. But he only ran in the mid 4.5s, which was below 40th percentile. And his 10-yard split was a 1.57, which is 38th percentile. So I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you, but like you see this on the film. I have a little bit of a less high confidence meter for Brents than I do for Dulcich, because I think the Dolphins do have more barriers to play at cornerback. And I understand the questions that exist about Storm Duck and Jack Jones and his consistency. The nice thing about Brents is this is not a one-year bet. He was a second-round draft choice in 23, so he's only going into his third year. He has 2 years left on his rookie contract, and you're going to be paying pennies on the dollar for it. The Dolphins have picked up, I just updated my own personal roster and salary cap sheet. It was $1.495 million this year and then $1.87 million in 2026. So you're getting 2 years of play for barely over $3 million from JuJu Brents. This could maybe be you strike gold for a guy who has ample talent, but again, he's had injuries and it's cost him meaningful time. His second season in the NFL, he barely played. He played about 500 snaps as a rookie. So guys scratching the surface. Lou Anarumo comes in, wants to run a different kind of defense. Not a great fit. So they move on from Julius Brents. They cut their losses in the midst of bringing in the likes of Xavier Howard. Let's see how that goes. Of course, Anarumo and Howard have history together during their time in Miami. I think for Brents, you're hoping you see enough to maybe give him a shot going into 2026. But if injuries strike throughout the course of the season, or if Jack Jones is too up and down, or if Storm Duck is too feast or famine, and that's my question with Storm Duck. It seems like whatever you coach him on this play, do this. That's what he's going to do, which can be a good thing, with the exception of like you go to the 3rd and long conversion that Jacksonville had, or it was not a conversion, but it was an open throw in the preseason game. And Storm presses the outside player, and there's one eligible player, and he releases up the field and runs a deep hook. And the running back comes to that side, but he chip releases, and it's 3rd and 11, and Storm Duck is squatting in the flat at 4 yards of depth. Now, I think Willie Gay was more responsible for that play and not squeezing that throwing window, being that he was the weak side hook defender, and he took a vertical drop instead of getting some expansion to take that eligible as he worked to the hook. But if you want to play it from top down, if you're Storm Duck, you can sink and maybe be in a position if he leads him outside versus inside to attack the throwing window. And that's, you go back to Storm and when he played last year and just some of the instinctive in real time play that bubble against Green Bay outside in and force the cut back inside instead of trying to run underneath of it and giving up the sideline. Like little things like that. So I'm not, they've talked a big game with Storm Duck, but they made 2 waiver claims and signed Rasul Douglas this week. So I don't know how confident I am. I could see if there are struggles, JuJu Brents by default getting opportunities. But I would say my confidence level there, because you do have Rasul Douglas, because you do have Jack Jones, you do have Storm Duck, you do have the safeties and the ability to run big nickel. You do have Ethan Bonner, who looked like he was really coming on, and then all of a sudden has a hamstring against Detroit. I think there's enough guys that have experience that things would have to go wrong with a lot of dominoes for Brents to see the field early in Miami. So I'd say my confidence level for Brents giving you 2025 contributions is lower than my confidence in Brents giving you potentially some appeal and maybe threatening for a spot in 2026 when he's playing on a rookie the contract year for his rookie contract. But I love that that's 2 years of player control for a super high tools guy that's just simply under-repped. And maybe the light bulb comes on, and maybe this is the scheme that does allow him to play super aggressive. I go back to what Chris Greer said yesterday, that we feel good about what this team can be. And we could talk all we want, but they have to go out and do it, right? And it's like, I look at the cornerback room with Marshall and Brents and Jack Jones and Storm Duck, and then you've got a floor raiser in Rasul Douglas. More on him in just a minute. And I say, do I think this can be league average cornerback room? And then if you've got force multipliers and you've got difference makers and you got needle movers in the front seven, it's not an Achilles heel that's going to sink your season. Yeah, it can be that. But it's not guaranteed to be that. And just like all these things can go well and these players can all have the light bulb come on and play lights out, there's variance, high variance with everybody other than Rasul Douglas, which is what I think makes the Rasul Douglas addition so important for me. Rasul Douglas is the player I have the highest level of confidence that he will make a needle-moving contribution to the team. And Mike McDaniel said today, we're not in the business of just giving away starting jobs. And Rasul Douglas today said, this defensive system is very different than what I played in Buffalo and in Green Bay. There's maybe a little bit of overlap with Green Bay, but I haven't played the half of it. So that's the concern for Rasul, is it's August 28th. You got a game in 11 days or 10 days. Kyle does math live. I'm like, it's go time. And how quickly can you get acclimated to the system and the communications and the checks and what you guys are going to be doing against Indianapolis to game plan specifically for the Colts? But however long that onboarding takes, Rasul Douglas was a really important signing for me because I think Rasul Douglas is the floor raiser of the cornerback room. You know what he is and you know what he's not. And I think there's ways in which the Dolphins can implement coverage-wise. You want to be physical, but then play cloud coverage and play in the flats. And like the Storm Duck rep, if there's one eligible to your side and he runs a deep hook in between the numbers and the hash, and you're the flat defender and there's nobody there to hold you and it's 3rd and 11 and 3rd and 12, you can sink under that damn thing and you can maybe squeeze the throwing window and attack the football. And having that understanding of leveraging all the routes at the NFL level with consistency because you've done it. Or alternatively, you could play him in a half turn and cover 3 and let him play with everything in front of him and play with vision to the quarterback and let the instincts that he's played with, and he's a ball magnet. He's been a ball magnet. Is he in the prime of his career? No. But there's a certain baseline level of expectation and threshold for play. My confidence that Rasul Douglas is going to give you contributions and not be like, hey, remember when we signed Rasul Douglas on August 26th and then he was cut after week 3? Haha, fun times, right? Like, And that happens with transactions every year for teams. It's like, oh, we thought we were going to have something with this guy. I think Rasul's going to play. And while I agree for Mike McDaniel, you're not in the business of giving away starting jobs. I think you have a floor raiser in that spot that can help stabilize one of those positions. And then maybe if you need to give a little extra safety support to whoever the other corner is, you can try to walk that line, walk that tightrope appropriately. We're going to do Kendall Lamm, Jeff Wilson Jr. next on the program. Make sure you guys stick with us. Guys, you probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them for yourself, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Regie Ready. Regie Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike usual pills that take hours, Regia's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in just 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options have not worked for you, Regia might be the answer. Join the over 150,000 men who have already made the switch. Head to Regiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatments. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Regie website for full safety information. The NFL season, it's here. It's a week away. FanDuel's making sure you're ready for kickoff with this can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love FanDuel because however you like to bet, however you like to play, they offer it, whether that's player props, building same-game parlays, or jumping in live as the action unfolds. Makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, the best way to add a little bit more energy to your game days. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now. Visit FanDuel.com, get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. This might be controversial, but I think Kendall Lamm is going to be OT4 regardless. Now, Kendall Lamm last year was the swing, and Patrick Paul was the OT4. And then Kendall Lamm, once Austin Jackson goes down, assumes a starting spot. And then when Teron Armstead gets banged up, it's Patrick Paul that goes in at left tackle. And then Lamb goes down with back surgery where he couldn't feel like the left side of his body at the end of the year and had to miss the last couple of weeks. Gutted it out as best he could for as long as he could. I think that's a choice that Miami's going to have to make. You could tell me that if they need a swing tackle, they play Kendall Lamm on certain weeks. You could tell me if they need a swing tackle, they could play Larry Borom on certain weeks. Is your game plan centered around the run, or is your game plan centered around the pass? Because they're players with foiling and contrasting strengths. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because when you have depth and you have questionable, if your backups were sturdy players across the board, they'd be starters, and they'd be starters for either you or someone else. And that's where Kendall Lamm goes to Philadelphia. He feels great physically. I'm thrilled that he's back because I have a great deal of respect for Kendall Lamm, the professional, how he handles the responsibility, the weight of responsibility for not being groomed as a starter and being ready to go in on a moment's notice. And he did it for you time and time again the last 2 years. I also think if the Dolphins are going to be more serious about running the football in 2025, if one of the starters has to miss time, Larry Borom, I still think, gives you a better profile as a run blocker. Now, you might have the season unfold and get to know your personnel and say, hey, if the starters go down, we're going to be hopefully not as extreme. Screen, West Coast, quick throw, passing offense, and we're going to use that as an extension of the run game. It's what the Dolphins did last year. It was not a very fun time. At times, it's not a very fun time. And if you do that, then yeah, I think Kendall Lamm makes more sense. But you only, I think, want to do that offensively if you have to, and if your hands are tied and you're forced into it. I would expect Kendall Lamm to need 2 offensive tackle injuries or 2 offensive line injuries that puts Larry Borum into the first spot to get on the field. I'll give him a 5 out of 10. I'd say Greg Dulcich is a 5 out of 10. I'd say JuJu Brents is a 4 out of 10. I'll go 4 out of 10. I want to. The pathway for Dulcich is so much more black and white for me. Where the other guys, I think there's other guys on the roster that could compound that. Now, what Lamm has to his advantage that Brents doesn't is the supreme knowledge of the terminology in the offense and some familiarity with how the flow of a game goes and how Mike McDaniel calls a football game. So that's the wild card there. But I would still have Kendall Lamm personally, just based off of knowing what the film looked like when you were trying to run the ball last year, knowing that that's a big point of emphasis. I would still have Kendall Lamm as OT4. But if that's your OT4, you got one of, with all due respect to Philadelphia for cutting and loose, Philadelphia's got a better offensive line than the Dolphins do by far. I think Philly might have the best offensive line in football. But if that's your OT4, he's one of the top OT4s in all football, in my opinion, if Kendall Lamm is healthy and you're in a position where he gets to play his game to his strengths, which the Dolphins kind of had to do by extension in the second half of the year last year. Rasul Douglas, I don't know that did I give him a number? I'm like at 8 or 9 out of 10, just because I think he's such an obvious floor raiser for what that room has with and without Rasul Douglas. Jeff Wilson Jr. I think Jeff Wilson will have a fine cameo appearance in the first month of the season. Mike McDaniel said Jalen Wright did have a minor procedure. The objective is for him to be back September-ish. That certainly makes it sound like a potential IR to return designation could be on the table for Jalen Wright. Ollie Gordon stocks way up. Jeff Wilson probably going to take the first 3 weeks of the season and be elevated. And then if there's an injury, JaMychal Hasty, who they added to the practice squad, can be the backup elevation off the practice squad. I don't know that you'll see a great deal of touches and opportunities because Ollie's fresh legs. He's got a great attitude. Devon is obviously a high volume player for you at running back. So I'd put him at 3. So of these new additions, I have Rasul Douglas, a 9 out of 10 confidence level. He's going to be making meaningful contributions from workload perspective and quality of play. Everybody else is pretty close. I would have Greg Dulcich by a product of the tight end room and what his skill set, I think, can be and what he showed as a rookie would be next on my list at a 5 out of 10 with confidence. And then Brents and Kendall Lamm would be 1 slot out of 10 behind him. Jeff Wilson a slot behind them. But knowing on game days, there might be a decent chance that the only ones that dress on game days to start for Miami would be Rasul Douglas, Kendall Lamm, and Jeff Wilson. Like Brents might be a healthy scratch as he just first gets into the defensive scheme, and Greg Dulcich is on the practice squad. They need to make the conscious effort to elevate him, but that's going to be tough to do when the Dolphins are elevating a kicker off the practice squad to kick for Jason Sanders for the first 3 weeks, and Jeff Wilson's also on the practice squad. So we'll see what other shuffling needs to happen for this roster. But at least for the first 3 weeks of the season, that appears to be kind of what the plan is. But I'm looking big picture across this full 17-game slate. That's going to do it for us here today on the show. Kyle Krabs, keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your Thursday. I'll be back to talk to y'all again soon. Go Fins.